Even rival players are fanning the flames with cryptic likes and emojis, stoking the hype without saying a word, and every time Indiana doesn't address the rumors, the frenzy grows. Critics, however, see this silence as manipulative. They argue that the Fever are playing with fan emotions, dangling the possibility of Clark's return to boost ticket sales and engagement without any guarantee she's actually ready. After all, this isn't just about hype, this is about an athlete's health. A groin injury isn't a minor tweak. It's the kind of injury that can derail a career if rushed. By refusing to communicate, the Fever are walking a dangerous tightrope between anticipation and backlash. But here's the ironic twist. The silence may actually be working in Indiana's favor. Instead of fading into the background as just another struggling team, the Fever have managed to make themselves the center of the WNBA conversation. Every sports outlet is talking about them. Every insider is trying to dig for information. Every fan base, even rivals, is caught up in the guessing game. And all of it revolves around one question: when will Caitlin Clark return? So in the end, Indiana's silence is the story. By saying nothing, they've created everything: tension, anticipation, controversy, and excitement. It's the kind of perfect storm that can only exist in modern sports media. And when the announcement finally does drop, the silence will have served its purpose, making Clark's return not just news, but a spectacle. So, is Caitlin Clark coming back this week, or are fans being strung along for nothing? That's the question rattling through every corner of the WNBA right now, because depending on who you listen to, her return is either right around the corner or still several weeks away. This clash of timelines between optimistic insiders and cautious reporters has created a cloud of uncertainty that only fuels the frenzy surrounding Clark's comeback. Let's start with the hopeful side. National voices like ESPN's Holly Rowe have hinted that Clark's return could be imminent, possibly within days. These kinds of statements don't just appear out of thin air. They usually come from whispers inside locker rooms, conversations with training staff, or body language spotted during practices. The idea of Clark returning this week has sent fans into overdrive, with some already buying tickets under the assumption they'll be there for her comeback game. But then, there's the other side. Beat reporters, like Scott Agnes, who cover the Fever day in and day out, paint a much different picture. Agnes has directly told fans to have patience, suggesting Clark may still be several weeks away. He doubled down in YouTube comments, reminding viewers that just because everyone is desperate for her return doesn't mean it's happening tomorrow. According to him, it's at least several more weeks, a timeline that would push Clark's comeback closer to the end of the season, maybe even into the playoff stretch. This stark divide has left fans caught in the middle. Do they trust the polished optimism of national insiders, who thrive on hype, or do they put their faith in the sober caution of local reporters, who may have better access but less incentive to feed speculation? Both camps make compelling points. After all, Holly Rowe wouldn't risk her credibility without some basis in fact. But Scott Agnes has been embedded with the team all season, watching every practice, speaking with staff, and providing granular updates long before national outlets cared. The controversy here is deeper than just timelines. It speaks to a larger issue in sports media: the battle between hope and truth. Fans crave optimism, they want to believe their star is about to return. Teams, on the other hand, often prefer controlled messaging, stretching timelines, so they're never accused of rushing a player back. And stuck in the middle is Caitlin Clark herself, whose body ultimately makes the final call. What makes this tug-of-war even more explosive is the lack of transparency from Indiana. Instead of clarifying the situation, they've stayed silent, letting the conflicting narratives play out unchecked. For fans, that means endless speculation. For the media, it means dueling headlines: Clark could return this week versus Clark still weeks away. And for the WNBA, it means one player's health status is dominating every conversation around the league. So, what's the truth? At this point, nobody outside the Fever's inner circle really knows. But one thing is certain: whether it's days or weeks, the timeline for Caitlin Clark's return has become as dramatic as the games themselves. And the longer this uncertainty lingers, the more it turns her comeback into not just a sports story, but a saga. If you were running the Indiana Fever, would you risk your franchise player's health just to survive a brutal 2-week stretch, or would you play it safe and risk throwing away your season? That's the impossible choice facing Indiana right now, as the timing of Caitlin Clark's return collides with one of the toughest schedules in the WNBA. The Fever's next few matchups read like a gauntlet designed to expose every weakness. Back-to-back games against the Minnesota Lynx, the league's most dominant squad sitting atop the standings with a staggering 28-5 record, followed immediately by a showdown with Seattle, another powerhouse, and then tough contests against the Sparks, Valkyries, and more. For a team already clinging to playoff contention, this stretch could make or break their season. And that's exactly why Clark's potential return is so controversial. On one hand, her presence changes everything. Defenses collapse around her, spacing opens up, and suddenly Indiana's shooters and post players look twice as dangerous. A single Caitlin Clark game can swing momentum, not just in the box score, but in the morale of an entire roster. Dropping her into this stretch could give the Fever a fighting chance against teams that otherwise look unbeatable. But here's the other side. Is this really the right time? Throwing Clark back into action against the Lynx, the most physical, aggressive, and disciplined team in the league, feels like baptism by fire. Minnesota will not ease her in gently. They'll test her injury, they'll bump her on screens, they'll crowd her off the ball. If she's anything less than 100%, the Lynx could turn her comeback into a nightmare. Seattle wouldn't be any kinder. Every veteran in this league knows Clark is the face of the WNBA right now, and that makes her a target. This is where timing becomes both a weapon and a risk. Indiana's front office and coaching staff know they can't afford to fall too far in the standings. Sitting at 6th place is a fragile lifeline. One bad stretch could send them spiraling out of playoff contention entirely. But they also know that rushing Clark back too soon could cause re-injury, derailing not only this season but potentially her long-term career. It's the ultimate gamble: protect the star or protect the season. Fans are torn as well. Many are pleading for patience, saying don't risk it against Minnesota, wait until the Sparks or Valkyries, where the games are still meaningful but not as punishing. Others argue the Fever don't have the luxury of waiting, that if Clark doesn't return now, there may not be a season left to save. And hovering over all of it is the league itself, which desperately wants Clark back in primetime matchups to boost ratings and headlines. So the question isn't just when she'll return, but where. Do you debut her against the league's best and let the world watch her prove she's still the star everyone remembers? Or do you ease her back against weaker opponents, protecting her body but sacrificing hype? Either way, the clock is ticking. The Fever season, and maybe even the league's momentum, hinges on getting this timing right. Let's stop sugarcoating it. Without Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever are just another middle-of-the-pack team clinging to survival. That's the harsh reality staring Indiana in the face right now. Yes, they've managed to claw their way back up to 6th place in the standings. Yes, they've shown flashes of resilience behind Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Sophie Cunningham. But the truth is undeniable: this roster, without Clark, simply doesn't have the firepower to make a serious postseason run, and the Fever front office knows it. Think about what Clark brings to the table. She isn't just another scorer, she's the engine that makes Indiana's offense run. Her deep shooting stretches defenses, forcing opponents to guard 30 feet from the basket. Her vision opens up passing lanes that don't exist for anyone else on this roster. Her ability to draw fouls at an elite rate puts pressure on defenses in ways that can completely shift momentum. With her on the court, every other player's job gets easier. Without her, the Fever look predictable, stagnant, and far too dependent on half-court sets that don't scare elite teams. The numbers back it up too. Since Clark's injury, Indiana's offensive rating has plummeted. Their transition game, once one of their biggest weapons, has slowed to a crawl. Their spacing disappears without her gravity, leaving Boston double-teamed and Mitchell forced into tough contested shots. It's not that the Fever lack talent, it's that their system was built around Clark. Take away the centerpiece, and suddenly the entire puzzle falls apart. Is the Indiana Fever misleading fans, or are we actually on the verge of the most anticipated comeback the WNBA has seen in years? That's the question echoing across sports media today as rumors swirl that Caitlin Clark, sidelined with a nagging groin injury, could be suiting up for the Fever again as early as this week. For weeks now, Indiana has looked like a ship drifting without its captain, competitive at times, scrappy in others, but never quite convincing as a playoff threat without their young superstar on the floor. And suddenly, the possibility of Clark's return has turned the WNBA landscape upside down. The whispers began innocently enough, a few insiders noting that Clark had been seen working out at team facilities, a couple of tweets about her body language during warm-ups, and speculation from talk shows that Indiana might be saving her for the perfect moment. But then, a domino fell, one roster transaction that has set the sports world ablaze. Clark's name is back in headlines. Fans are storming comment sections, and rival teams are nervously recalculating game plans. Why? Because whether you're a Fever fan or not, you know exactly what her presence means. She changes the way every defense in this league has to operate. But here's the controversial part. Should she even be returning this soon? Doctors preach caution with groin injuries. They linger, they flare up, they destroy seasons if managed poorly. And yet, the buzz suggests Indiana is about to roll the dice, banking on Clark's star power to save not only their season, but perhaps the WNBA's ratings in a year, desperate for a spark. Critics are already blasting the Fever for prioritizing ticket sales over player health, while supporters argue that Clark herself wouldn't step on the floor unless she was ready. Both sides agree on one thing: her return isn't just about basketball. It's about momentum, hope, and the shifting tides of the entire league. So, as we sit here today, fans are left with one burning question. Is this comeback the product of Clark's determination and healing, or the product of a franchise and a league that simply cannot afford to keep its brightest star on the sidelines any longer. One way or another, the storm is brewing, and Caitlin Clark is at the very center. You don't just cut a player in the middle of the season unless something big is about to happen. That's the line echoing through WNBA circles after the Indiana Fever announced they had released guard Kyra Lambert. On paper, Lambert's departure seems insignificant, a player who logged just 1 minute across 2 games, a name most casual fans barely recognized. But in professional sports, timing is everything, and the timing of this move has sparked a firestorm of speculation that goes far beyond the stat sheet. Here's what makes this so controversial. Teams rarely make minor roster moves without a clear purpose. Cutting Lambert opens up a roster spot, and in the world of the WNBA, where contracts and team sizes are tightly regulated, that empty slot instantly becomes the center of attention. So, who is that spot for? Insiders, fans, and even rival coaches all seem to be pointing in one direction. Caitlin Clark. The Fever's decision not to even give Lambert a public thank you post fueled that narrative even further. Think about that. In today's sports culture, where even 10-day contracts and practice squad players often receive respectful farewells, Indiana's silence was deafening. To many, it signaled one thing. Lambert was never the story, she was just a placeholder. A temporary body keeping the roster warm until the franchise's centerpiece was ready to return. Fans immediately took to social media, connecting the dots. Why now? Why her? And why with no acknowledgement, they asked. Some argued that Indiana is clearly clearing space for Clark's comeback. Others speculated the Fever might be preparing for a different addition, maybe a mid-season free agent or a trade target. A few even floated conspiracy theories that this was all an elaborate cover to distract from Sophie Cunningham's injury status. But let's be real. If you're the Indiana Fever, what else could this move be about? Lambert wasn't part of the rotation, wasn't a long-term developmental project, and wasn't adding depth to an already guard-heavy roster. The only thing her release accomplished was opening up a spot at exactly the moment whispers of Clark's return hit their peak. And that is not coincidence, that is orchestration. Critics say this kind of maneuver reeks of desperation, a franchise clutching onto its only chance to stay relevant. Supporters counter that it's simply smart business. When your star player is close to returning, you need to make room for her now, not later. But either way, the message is clear. The Fever aren't standing still anymore. They're making moves. And whether they admit it or not, every single move revolves around Caitlin Clark. So here's the bottom line. A player most fans barely noticed has now become the key piece in the biggest WNBA storyline of the season. And if the Fever's front office thought this would slip under the radar, they were dead wrong. This isn't just a roster adjustment, it's a signal flare. And everyone, from diehard Fever fans to rival coaches, is watching closely to see what happens next. Sometimes, it's not what a team says, it's what they don't say that tells the real story. And right now, the Indiana Fever's silence is deafening. Following the release of Kyra Lambert, fans expected at least some form of clarity, maybe a hint from the coaching staff, a vague timeline from the front office, or even a cryptic Instagram story from Caitlin Clark herself. Instead, there's been nothing. No official updates, no casual mentions, not even a routine. We'll see how she feels this week from head coach Stephanie White. That void has become the breeding ground for speculation, theories, and a tidal wave of hype that only grows louder by the day. In professional sports, silence is rarely accidental. When teams want to calm fans, they issue injury updates. When they want to hype anticipation, they drop teasers. But when they go quiet, that usually means one of two things. Either the news is so bad, they're scrambling to spin it, or the announcement they're about to make is so big, they want maximum impact. And given the Fever's precarious playoff hopes, most people believe the latter. The silence is not caution, it's strategy. Social media has turned this into a circus. Fans refresh the Fever's official X, formerly Twitter account, every few minutes, waiting for a graphic that reads, "She's back." Sports blogs are dissecting every frame of practice footage, zooming in to see if Clark is jogging at full speed, if she's cutting left or right, if she looks game ready. Even rival players are fanning the flames with cryptic likes and emojis, stoking the hype without saying a word. And every time Indiana doesn't address the rumors, the frenzy grows. Critics, however, see this silence as manipulative. They argue that the Fever are playing with fan emotions, dangling the possibility of Clark's return to boost ticket sales and engagement, without any guarantee she's actually ready. After all, this isn't just about hype, this is about an athlete's health. A groin injury isn't a minor tweak. It's the kind of injury that can derail a career if rushed. By refusing to communicate, the Fever are walking a dangerous tightrope between anticipation and backlash. But here's the ironic twist. The silence may actually be working in Indiana's favor. Instead of fading into the background as just another struggling team, the Fever have managed to make themselves the center of the WNBA conversation. Every sports outlet is talking about them. Every insider is trying to dig for information. Every fan base, even rivals, is caught up in the guessing game. And all of it revolves around one question: when will Caitlin Clark return? So in the end, Indiana's silence is the story. By saying nothing, they've created everything: tension, anticipation, controversy, and excitement. It's the kind of perfect storm that can only exist in modern sports media. And when the announcement finally does drop, the silence will have served its purpose, making Clark's return not just news, but a spectacle. Sometimes, it's not what a team says, it's what they don't say that tells the real story. And right now, the Indiana Fever's silence is deafening. Following the release of Kyra Lambert, fans expected at least some form of clarity, maybe a hint from the coaching staff, a vague timeline from the front office, or even a cryptic Instagram story from Caitlin Clark herself. Instead, there's been nothing. No official updates, no casual mentions, not even a routine "we'll see how she feels this week" from head coach Stephanie White. That void has become the breeding ground for speculation, theories, and a tidal wave of hype that only grows louder by the day. In professional sports, silence is rarely accidental. When teams want to calm fans, they issue injury updates. When they want to hype anticipation, they drop teasers. But when they go quiet, that usually means one of two things. Either the news is so bad they're scrambling to spin it, or the announcement they're about to make is so big they want maximum impact. And given the Fever's precarious playoff hopes, most people believe the latter. The silence is not caution, it's strategy. Social media has turned this into a circus. Fans refresh the Fever's official X, formerly Twitter, account every few minutes, waiting for a graphic that reads, "She's back." Sports blogs are dissecting every frame of practice footage, zooming in to see if Clark is jogging at full speed, if she's cutting left or right, if she looks game ready. This is why her return isn't just about health, it's about survival. Indiana can't afford to tread water much longer. The league's middle tier is stacked, with teams like Chicago, Washington, and Phoenix all jostling for playoff position. A few more losses could push Indiana from 6th to 9th in the blink of an eye, effectively ending their postseason hopes. And let's be blunt, a Fever playoff run without Caitlin Clark doesn't just feel unlikely, it feels impossible. But here's where the pressure gets complicated. Clark's health should always come first, but the Fever are trapped between two realities. Protecting her long-term means playing it safe, easing her back slowly, maybe even shelving her if necessary. But sacrificing this season would be devastating, not just for the team's morale, but for the league itself. The WNBA has hitched so much of its momentum to Clark's star power that missing the playoffs in her second year would feel like a massive letdown. Fans sense this tension too. Every time Indiana scrapes out a win, social media fills with optimism. Imagine what they'll look like when Caitlin's back. Every time they lose, the panic sets in. We're not making it without her. The entire season has become a waiting game, where Clark isn't just a player, she's the difference between irrelevance and contention. So let's call it what it is. The Fever's playoff chances don't rest on strategy, coaching, or bench depth. They rest on one thing and one thing only: Caitlin Clark's return. And until she steps back onto that court, Indiana will remain a team defined not by what they are, but by what they're missing. Are the Indiana Fever actually protecting Caitlin Clark, or are they protecting themselves? That's the question critics are firing at the front office as this saga drags on. Because make no mistake, the heat isn't just on the players anymore. It's on the executives, the coaching staff, and everyone tasked with steering this franchise through one of the most pivotal moments in its history. Let's rewind for a moment. This is a franchise that hasn't seen playoff relevance in years. Before Clark's arrival, Indiana had been the league's punching bag, collecting loss after loss while struggling to sell tickets. Clark changed everything. Overnight, the Fever went from a forgotten franchise to a media magnet. Merchandise sales exploded. National broadcasts featured Indiana almost every week. The league itself bent schedules to maximize her exposure. In other words, the Fever are no longer just another team, they're the investment. And that reality puts immense pressure on the people upstairs. Now, here's where it gets dicey. Every decision the Fever make with Clark is being scrutinized. When she first went down with a groin injury, some insiders whispered that the front office downplayed its severity to avoid panic. Others claim the team has been deliberately vague with updates, playing a game of smoke and mirrors to keep opponents guessing while stringing fans along with hope. That's not just speculation, it's a reflection of how little transparency has come out of Indiana since this all began. And fans are noticing. Social media threads are filled with questions like, why won't they just give us a timeline? And are they hiding something about her recovery? This silence is breeding mistrust. For every optimistic update, there are critics saying the team is prioritizing ticket sales, TV ratings, and playoff revenue over Clark's long-term health. And when that narrative gains traction, it puts the front office in a no-win situation. On top of that, consider the coaching dilemma. Christy Sides has built her system around Clark, but without her, Indiana looks lost. Is that on the coach? Or is it on the front office for not building a roster deep enough to survive Clark's absence? A strong front office anticipates adversity. The best ones know how to protect their stars by surrounding them with support. Right now, Indiana's lack of depth has exposed just how reliant they are on one player, and that failure of foresight lands squarely on the decision makers. Let's be blunt. If Clark comes back too soon and re-injures herself, the front office will be crucified. Fans will demand accountability, pundits will question Indiana's competence, and rival executives will quietly shake their heads, saying, "This is what happens when you put business before basketball." But if they hold her out too long and the Fever miss the playoffs, they'll face a different storm, angry fans, lost revenue, and the embarrassment of wasting the league's brightest star in her prime marketing years. This is the impossible box Indiana's front office is trapped in. And while Clark's health should be the only priority, there's no escaping the reality that business, optics, and pressure are shaping every move behind the scenes. For a franchise that just found its way back into the spotlight, one wrong decision could send them spiraling right back into irrelevance. The fan base is split right down the middle, and Caitlin Clark has become both the unifying hope and the dividing controversy of the WNBA. No matter where you look, whether it's packed arenas, post-game interviews, or the endless scroll of social media, the Fever fan base is caught in an emotional tug-of-war. On one side, you have the optimists, fiercely loyal and unshakably patient. These are the fans who chant her name at every game, even when she's in street clothes on the bench. They believe Clark's return will come at just the right time, and they're willing to wait because they see her as the long-term savior of Indiana basketball. On the other side, you've got the frustrated loyalists, the fans who feel misled, manipulated, even taken advantage of. These voices ask, why are we being kept in the dark? Why is every injury update so vague? And why does it feel like the team is stringing us along instead of being honest? Their patience is wearing thin. They buy the jerseys, they show up to games, they've invested their emotions into this team, and in return, they expect transparency. And then, beyond Fever territory, there's the national stage. Clark's fanbase stretches far beyond Indiana. She's a generational star who has pulled casual viewers into the WNBA, many of whom admit they never watched before she arrived. For those fans, Clark isn't just a player, she's the reason they tune in at all. And when she's sidelined, the anger flares up. National broadcasts lose their shine, attendance dips slightly, and suddenly, the league itself becomes the target of frustration. Why can't they protect her? Why do officials allow rough play? Why does she keep getting battered? This emotional split is creating a fascinating and volatile culture around the Fever. Some fans defend Clark so fiercely that they attack anyone who dares to criticize her game, calling out haters and framing every foul against her as a conspiracy. Others, even Fever supporters, worry that the hysteria around her has become unhealthy, that the team is now more about celebrity and drama than basketball itself. But here's the key. Whether they're hopeful or furious, patient or panicked, fans are invested. That's something Indiana hasn't had in years. Before Clark, Fever games were sparsely attended, barely trending topics. Now, every game, every update, every rumor about Clark sets the internet ablaze. That emotional investment is powerful, but it's also dangerous, because the higher the passion, the sharper the backlash if things go wrong. You can already see the ripple effects. After every Fever loss, the anger grows louder. After every vague update, the distrust deepens. After every sight of Clark walking gingerly, the anxiety multiplies. For a fan base starved of success, Clark represents not just hope, but the only hope. And that burden of expectation is unlike anything we've seen in recent WNBA history. At this point, it's not just a basketball storyline, it's an emotional powder keg. The Fever season is being written as much in the stands and on Twitter threads as it is on the hardwood. And that dynamic raises the stakes for everyone involved. The players, the coaches, the front office, and most of all, Caitlin Clark herself. Is the media protecting Caitlin Clark or profiting off her struggles? That's the controversial question circling sports talk shows, podcasts, and even the front pages of national outlets. Because one thing is clear, Caitlin Clark's story isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about narrative, ratings, and the relentless machine of modern media. From the moment Clark declared for the WNBA draft, her journey became headline fuel. ESPN, Fox Sports, Bleacher Report, and countless YouTube creators built their summer programming around her every move. Draft night wasn't just a draft, it was a spectacle. With Clark's selection drawing numbers the league hadn't seen in years. And now, with her injured and sidelined, the coverage hasn't slowed down. If anything, it's doubled.